afternoon to you, our cherished and discerning listeners. It's another beautiful and blessed Wednesday, and we here at Multimedia are happy to bring you another exciting edition of your favorite business development program on radio, Masterclass. Masterclass is powered by Joy Business and brought to us by Goyle. Goyle Good Energy, Goyle Yenara Yedia. Masterclass is also brought to us by GCB. GCB, your bank for life. My name, as always, is Barnafo, and I'm happy to bring you today's edition of Masterclass. Here on the show on Masterclass, we've been talking about investments and becoming investment ready. Last week, we spent time with Mr. Richard Edu Dakon of First Code Management Services. Mr. Edu Dakon, if you're listening to us, a very good afternoon to you, and thank you for spending time with us here on the show. We've been talking about investments, and I promised at the end of the show last week that we're going to continue in that vein of conversation because we're at that part of our development process where we no longer do things on our own. So the word is no longer I, but the word is now we. Together, we can do a lot more. The acronym TEAM, or the word TEAM, also is an acronym that says together, everyone achieves more. So we're looking at partnerships, we're looking at collaborations, we're looking at working together. Someone gets up and says, listen, I also want to go into the manufacturing of shoes, for example, and that's what you do in your business. But I don't want to start and reinvent the wheel. You're already doing it. You've had a company that's already investing in shoes. How can we partner together? You are, let's say, turning over 1 million CDs a year in terms of profit at the end of everything. I've got some 5 million CDs that I've come into either by inheritance or by a bank loan or by whatever means. And I want to put that money into your business so that together we can work and make the good profit. But before I put that money into your business, I will ask you certain questions. And those are the conversations we're going to be having today. What are the questions that an investor will be looking at? Your books, your finances. Today, we're privileged to have back with us in the studio. You notice I'm smiling a lot, or if you're listening to us, you can tell by my voice that I'm smiling a lot because we have another friend of the show, an uncle, a great man by all standards. I'll read his resume shortly, and you understand why. He's been here on the show before. He's also from First Code Management Services, and he's in the person of Mr. Kwao DeGraft Johnson. You're welcome back to the show, sir.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'm excited to have you back because we got some great feedback when you were on the show earlier on about how you sort of shared and laid out the information, and people sort of related to it and found some good information in there. So I have little doubt, or I'm hopeful that my people here on the show today will also benefit very greatly from what we're about to share. We keep talking about being investor ready. We keep talking about positioning yourself, doing the right things. We've talked about policy. We've talked about corporate governance. We've talked about the position of the law. We've talked about the regulators, what they are looking out for. Today, we want to dwell a bit more on your finances and your books. We keep talking about it because we want people to learn, and we don't need to reinvent the wheel ourselves. But just a bit about Mr. Kwao DeGraft Johnson. If you missed the first time he was here, he's a senior consultant for First Code Management Services Limited, and he's also a consultant with several years of experience. He's worked in both money markets and capital markets in Ghana, and he was the finance manager of SDC Group of Companies back in the day. He was an executive director of Purple Management Services, which specialized in project management and business advisory services. He also is the founder of Kwao and Associates, which also focused on micro, small, and medium-scale enterprises. He's done a lot of work in this country. He's also been the director of companies in the transport, logistics, and haulage industry in the past. He's also done some work with KPMG, and his resume goes on and on and on. He has a kind of CV that I always say, when I grow up, I want to be like him. There are a lot of people when I grow up I want to be like. But that's because I'm hungry for knowledge. I want to learn. And the only way we can learn is to learn from our forerunners, the people who have gone ahead of us. Mr. Johnson, we've been talking a lot about being investor ready. Our listeners, own businesses. They are proprietors in their own right. Some of them have they are CEOs. Some of them are also working for companies, or they are partners in businesses or endeavors that have started. We do not need to reinvent the wheel ourselves. We've talked a lot about being investor ready, investment from the perspective of the investor, what they look out for and all that. Today we want to look at some best practices with a bit of emphasis on the finance aspect of it. And today I promise that I'll try and open the phone lines a bit early because we're going to have a conversation. We'll not be throwing information at you. When I spoke to Mr. Johnson last night, he says, I don't want to be terse about my submission. And so I will not give you slides. Let's have a conversation. So we're going to have a conversation today. It'll be open. It'll be very relaxed. We'll share ideas. And when we open the phone lines, we want to hear your thoughts. What are you doing differently? Are you investor ready? If someone had $1 million today and they say they want to put it in your company, are you ready? have you ticked the boxes? What questions have you done yourself? What introspection have you done? Those are the questions that we'll be asking in today's conversation. Mr. Johnson, let's take the conversation away, maybe from a certain start point, and then we'll build it as we go along.
Yes, thank you for having me. The challenge in our environment is that people haven't looked at investment from the perspective that it's a process. You don't get up one day and just say you are investor ready, because the investor coming has a lot of things he's going to look at. Now, let me start with the fact that people think that in today's world, you have to have been in existence for, say, 10 years or 5 years and so on. There are people willing to invest with startups, young companies, or young entrepreneurs because the dynamics change. And they want to see what you have that will convince them to put funds in. Because the investor has a motive. He wants to have some return. He wants to have some capital gains. And that is his motive. And you need to be in a position to let them be convinced that you are ready for that. And since you're going to look at it from the bottom line, it doesn't matter which way you look at it, there's going to be a point where the numbers are going to speak for themselves. Now, when you tell many people that keeping your financial records properly is a necessity, they think, oh, I want to dodge tax, they won't keep the records properly. For example, a business owner has never declared dividends, right, for a long time. You are not even sure how he's making drawings from the company, and So as soon as a third party comes in to start a due diligence, financial due diligence, a lot of questions are posed. So the question then becomes, why are investors not closing deals with potential companies that can? And those are the issues. You're not being honest. You're not being transparent. A little due diligence suddenly reveals that some things are not what they are. They can't see policy supporting the financial, So your track record doesn't matter. So if your financial model doesn't give confidence, nobody is going to put money in there. Yeah. So we just want people out there to know that, look, you can start now. We at First Code, for example, are always out helping people to position themselves to be investor ready, because they need to understand what the investor is out for. They need to recognize the expectations they have, and then put themselves in a position to meet their expectations. So I think I can land here and then.
Yes, as a preamble. Now, before you go into your next couple of points, something just occurred to me, as you spoke and gave your preamble, that sometimes it's not necessarily that business owners want to do the wrong thing. We'll come to that bit. I mean, if it's the wrong thing you're doing, clearly, then it's a decision you need to make. But sometimes it's not because people want to do the wrong thing. It's just because they don't know any better. And probably they don't also know best practice. And they're not averting their minds to learn same. I say this because there's a lot of things that are changing today in our world. And because we're talking about business, let's talk about business. Even the way of doing business is changing.
Definitely.
We talk about the new work ethic, the new work approach, the new work order. Things are beginning to change even in the way we work. So sometimes people just don't know any better. Can we just sort of share some thoughts on, just very briefly if you like, you can just touch on a few points, on what best practice examples are, with respect to this conversation on becoming investor ready.
Yeah.
Let's just say that you want to do things right for the sake of doing things right.
Yeah.
How do you do things right with your finances, with your recruitment, with your policies, with your corporate governance process, with your customer service, with your regulators, your relationship with your regulators? How do you do right by these things in an ever-changing environment, which keeps changing? I mean, we go to bed last night, woke up this morning, and things have changed.
Yeah.
It's difficult to keep up. How does a business owner who set up his business just to make small profits or to be relevant keep up with all of these things that were not part of his original?
Yes. I think I'll start with having banking relationships. You necessarily have to have a bank account. And you have to religiously ensure that almost every transaction is passing through your banking system. That when you receive money, let it go into the bank account, take out money, so that there's some kind of track record always available. Then anybody can come in there to help you. You also need to realize these things are supported by policies. Saying that means let it be clear. Some companies don't even have a manual or procedures or policies. Let everybody know how these accounts are managed, how money is spent, right? Let's see whether you have meetings to support what you are doing, right? That the moment you start to go that way, that you are being checked by documents you have put in place, and you, the owner or the management, are sticking to it, you are starting to do the right thing. Because your auditors will come. They will always give you a management letter or tell you some of the things that were weaknesses or shortfalls to guide you. Example is taxation. They would let you know exactly what to do, because if you are not tax compliant, and it's a serious risk area for anybody wanting to come in. See, so if you start to look at that aspect, you are getting somewhere. Another thing is, again, you mentioned recruitment. You have to look at it, the competence changes. So you have to be bold to know whether somebody is not delivering, and if you have to move the person out, to go that way, because it will matter to an investor when it comes talking to the management team to assess their technical competence or the vision behind it. And sometimes you find that some people are not delivering.
You know, Mr. Johnson, I'll just give you an example of this particular point of recruitment before you go on. So I was, should I say privileged or otherwise, to have been part of a process where a company I used to work for was going through the possibility of investor input. So the company was looking to bring on board investors. Now, the investors requested to speak to every management staff in an institution. At that point, I was responsible for part of the process. So they walked into, of course, they would have booked appointments and everything. They walk into your office, and in that room, in that meeting, you are the company. And you should be the authority on everything that has to do with your work area. Now, of course, there's a politics of it where they try and get additional information where they would not have otherwise received in the boardroom and all of that. But it's not exactly a very comforting experience to sit in a room with an investor who wants to speak directly to each manager. And at the end of this process, they did write a report, and they did indicate that certain colleagues of ours were not very strong in their role. And therefore, the recommendation was to let them go. And this is an investor. Just to buttress the point you're making, that you can't sit in your company and think that you are everything. The moment an investor comes in, they're comparing you to best practice. And so it's important to always keep your mind on what's happening in the world. I just wanted to support the point you were making.
And that is one of the issues that come up consistently, that we haven't got to the level, many companies, that if you bring an investor into your company, chances are some of your staff will go. Some people have to stay back. And that, should I call it threat, prevents some from taking on that decision. They take it that as soon as an investor comes, I'm going to cede managerial control. I'm going to be, maybe just a shareholder, and they will run things, and, But the point is, you are going to enjoy dividend and returns at a much higher level. But because of some of those things, people try to dance around. Maybe the owner or the owners haven't shared their vision very well with the management team. So they are not seeing the same thing. And the investor picks it up very quickly and says, no, these people are not set. How much money do we even need in this company? They are not sure. What are the future prospects? And your management team, everybody is saying something different. It doesn't give a good sign at all.
It's interesting you mentioned that, because, again, I was having a conversation with someone this week about generally work, and what their perspective was on the things that they do. And they did mention that they are taking a keen interest in the business that was being run. This was somebody in part of the operation, and they wanted to know the financial position of the company. They had taken a personal step to know the financial position of the company, because they had resolved in their minds that, granted that everything else was done properly, the financial position would be key in determining whether or not the company would continue to exist or otherwise. There are people who are in companies, other than, let's say, the owners or the managers, who are only concerned about their area of work and not necessarily the big picture or the entire picture. And you mentioned that, but I want you to harp on that a bit. Why it's important in the conversation on being investor ready that everybody at a certain level of responsibility, I don't even want to use the word management, at a certain level of responsibility close to the top, should have a certain understanding of the entire position of the company and where they're going. It's part of being investor ready.
Yeah. Yes, you will be surprised that some companies don't share their financial statements with all the management, you see, and nobody takes them through to explain the status of the company in terms of what we call ratio analysis, to let them understand whether the company is growing or not, whether the market share is changing, and so on. All these are sort of coming together in what we call the financial statements. They've asked auditors to come and do that. So whatever you've done is sort of being capsuled in that financial statement. So when the questions are coming and they want to know your market share and you have no strategy that your market share, you can defend the market share or increase it, it's going to affect the numbers in the future. So when they're asking questions, they're interested in the growth prospect and they're asking to know whether these numbers, you understand them, what efforts, what decisions, and so on. When COVID came, all of a sudden everybody was using the word strategic. So in first code like this, we had to do a number of programs with some companies just to let them understand, because COVID had taken them off and they had no scenarios in place to adjust for such market shocks and so forth. So then I had to go back to address issues and so on. Some people have done very well, they've come out, but some just listened to what was going on. Now people work from the home and so on. But the point is, an investor coming might ask you, what happens if, and you have no clue. Do you really know your competitors? What about what is happening elsewhere? What preparedness? All these things feature. And that's why I'm saying that when somebody in, let's say, sales just does his own and sits down and the financials come in, he's not being told just exactly the impact his numbers are having and so forth and so forth. It just doesn't go far enough to be investor prepared.
So it's absolutely important to have an idea of all of these numbers.
It's very, very necessary.
Right. If you just tuned in, this is Masterclass here on your Superstation. We're having a conversation here with Mr. Kwao DeGraff Johnson of the First Code Management Services. And we're extending our conversation on being investor ready. Do you have a business of any sort? We'll be getting interactive shortly. We want to hear your thoughts, your story. How are you running your company? What are the challenges you're going through? Are you benchmarking against best practice? Are you doing the right thing? Or it's my company, so I do it my way and I don't answer to anyone. Is that the perspective that you have of what you're doing? The world is changing today. How can we change along with it and become better? We continue in our conversation. I wanted to ask this question earlier on. We've talked about recruitment, we've talked about policies, we've talked about other things. How important is it that there is record kept of, should I say, relationship with a regulator in any line of business? How does that become important, or why is that important for an investor? That you should have a good working relationship with your regulator. And when I say good working relationship, it's not just relationship for the sake of relationship, but no breaches. Yeah. Which means you are doing the right thing. You're following, the regulations, whether in health, whether it was with HEFRA or with finance, with BOG, with SEC, whatever business you're in.
The law is, sometimes you have to look at it black and white. You're either in compliance or not in compliance. And when you're not in compliance, the penalties just follow. And the last thing an investor wants is to come and invest in a company that is going to end up having problems with tax or breaches and so on. The foreign investor knows that in his part of the world, these things are readily and strictly adhered to. So when they are coming into your country, they want to make sure that they are not going to have problems with that. For example, in the days we were in KPMG, we discovered that some companies, when they were coming to the country, they just asked, who are the 4 top accounting firms there? We want them because they will protect us. In those days, tax and all those things were part of the preview. You get me? Because they didn't want to, can you suggest a lawyer, a good lawyer in the corporate space, so that he will tell us the right thing? So they go out looking for the experts in those to make sure that they don't have any problem with the law. But here, we sometimes think we can always talk our way out of challenges, but not when you are bringing in an outside party. They won't tolerate that kind of thing, especially in the area of tax, you know. And that is one of the reasons why some people are not just ready for him, because they feel that some of their practices may change. Let's take a simple example. Every once in a while, when somebody goes to give bribe out there, and it comes out maybe years after, and big boys are being embarrassed. I was reading something on Coca-Cola. Say, yes, that is the system. So you don't. It's not tolerated. So you can't be operating that type of system and have them join you. Because sooner or later something will come up and they can be held responsible and liable in their countries. So it's not acceptable at all to play that kind of game when you want a serious investor. And that's why we're talking about upping the game, that if you want to get to international standards, one of the things, I'm sure Richard spoke a lot of that for you to understand, you have to stick to the rules. And actually when you are compliant, it's very easy for you to access a lot of funds and other benefits, because then the track record follows you, you know.
How much money is available? I don't want to say how much money. I'm not looking for a figure. But let's talk a bit about the availability of funds across the world, so that our listeners, I know our listeners know and understand already that there's money to be spent. People are looking to place money in certain places. But let's just share a few examples, if you will. I mean, from where you sit, I know that during COVID, for example, as relief, you know, certain governments of certain countries issued and doled out massive support. Even the government of Ghana also gave some reliefs for people who even had loans, extended tenures, you know, money to be able to subsidize certain things. There was money in the system. People made fortunes out of something that was meant to support them, and they're looking to place some of these monies. Where is the money in the world that people are looking to place? Just share. Let's share some. Because I mean, off air, we're talking about venture capitalists, we're talking about fund managers. How much money is available in the world, and where are these monies? Just to give people an idea of what we're talking about. It's not just the one person who is per chance may want to put money. There's money that people wake up with every day and go back to chest. That doesn't get placed because we don't pass the test. Let's talk a bit about availability of these monies.
Where I sit, you'd be surprised at calls that come. I have 500,000 to invest. Where do I place the money? Especially this COVID time when Ghanaians, I'm talking about Ghanaians in the diaspora who got quite a bit of money and wanted to invest. And the question keeps coming. And there was quite a lot of money suddenly available. And if we look at it from the perspective of Ghanaians alone and what kind of monies were available, it's well into the hundreds of millions. Because
dollars, you mean?
Yeah, in dollar terms, you see. But the moment the question comes, where do I invest? Everybody starts having a challenge. Because that's why we say investor readiness. The sort of things that they want to know are not simply available. And sometimes the question comes, do you know the person well? If I give that, then you are not in a position to, because you don't even...
you see liability coming.
Yes. Because I ask you, if you know the person well, are you prepared to? And you can't, because you are not yet in that space to know just how readily the person has adhered to good practices, you see. So it becomes a challenge, because sometimes too, the investor who may be getting prepared hasn't put himself out there for a would-be investor, potential investor, to know that, there are these, for example, we have local content laws, right? How many people are recognizing that? If the outside party wants to come in, he wants to, link up with a Ghanaian, joint venture or whatever other arrangements. And they're not even there. They haven't positioned themselves to even attract attention.
Capacity.
You see, so that's why at first we tell people, you come to us, let's negotiate and start to put you out there a bit, because then we can tell in the petroleum sector, these are the people currently interested in this. Which sector? Energy sector is going to come up with this new law. Look, there are some potential who might want to talk to you and that kind of thing. But you have to raise the stakes of your business and come out that, yes, this is what I want. Because what I was telling you earlier before we came in, that you ask some people that this business you created, did you create it to that with the intention of getting to a point and selling, and some people are surprised. So look, out there people set up businesses, and
Grow it
the
and
intention,
sell it.
yes. Some years want partners to be with them and then sustainably for a long time and are willing to cooperate that way. Others do know that they are technocrats of some sort or technical people. They've invented something, but they don't have capacity to manage a company.
Yeah.
So they want, I've done this, you come and help us sell the product and expand it and so on. But many times when you ask, people take it like a treasure you want to pass on to your children. And that alone stops a lot of things from happening.
And the conversation that we're having, there's a point you made earlier which I just want to sort of happen. There's a little proverb in our language that says that the posture with which you borrow is not the same posture with which you pay. And that's also because most of our borrowing and our lending in our communities is based on our promise of our word. But what we're saying is that to play in the corporate circles now, for somebody to place $500,000 in your business, it is not because you say you will pay.
Yeah.
So, somebody once said, don't tell me what you can do, show me what you have done.
Yeah.
So what we are saying here on the show today is that let the best practice that you have put in place, i.e. the best practice in your business, documenting things, attending meetings, calling meetings, not making unilateral decisions, letting it show that due process has been followed.
Yeah.
Showing the process flow between you and your regulator, your finances,
Yeah.
letting there be traction that shows growth, not magical growth.
Yeah.
You say you are a $10 million business in 2 years. You have never called a meeting before. There are no minutes.
Yeah.
There are no financials. Everything is in your head.
Yeah.
Nobody will put money in that kind of business because they want your work to speak.
Yes.
Let your work speak. Don't tell me.
Yeah.
Let your work speak.
And have some a business plan at least to support your plan. So let's look at it from a banking perspective a bit. A banker is interested in the short-term returns, and he's not going to just give you money. If you take the laws of the country, there are laws around deposits and so on, how to protect the depositors, and so there are regulations or guidelines as to how to take risks in giving the money out. So the banker is going to look at that from that perspective. It doesn't matter what you are going to say or so on. There is this thing at the back of the mind that, how sure am I that this money will get back? How is it going to be paid? And what's my fallback situation? That's why bankers will always ask about collateral, because they need to have some fallback position. But when you're looking at an investor, the kind we want, they are coming in usually as equity partners, or even if it's debt finance, long term. And they are looking for growth, and they have different risk appetites too. So that is the kind of investor or one who's going to put in capital that you would want for that kind of business. So it shifts a bit when it's long term than when it's short term. And those are some of the questions that...
I promised I was going to open the phone lines early today. I want us to get interactive so that our listeners can also be a part of it and ask a lot of questions. We have some messages from our sponsors here in the show today. And we'll just take a quick message from our sponsors. When we come back, I want us to get interactive. All right. And then we can begin to take some comments and questions from
some will share
our listeners so that they can also share their own practical experiences, and then we can be better for it. We'll take a quick message. We'll be right back.
Your favorite on-air business development program, Joy Business Masterclass, is in session, and you can interact with us on Facebook via the Joy99.7FM or Joy Business pages. If you tweet, the handle is at Joy997FM or at Joy Business GH. Don't forget to hashtag JB Masterclass. You can also call us on 0302 216541 or send your questions and contributions through to the WhatsApp number 0551 111997, and our facilitators will address your concerns. Attention everyone, class is in progress.
Welcome back. If you've just tuned in, this is Masterclass here on your superstation Joy 99.7. We're getting interactive right away. Today we have continued with the conversation on investment, and we're privileged to be joined in the studio by Mr. Kwao de Graaf Johnson of the First Code Management Service. Now we want to hear what you have to say. Numbers to call 0302216541, or you can also send us your comments on 05511111997. Is your company investor ready? What things have you put in place? What plans have you put in place? How have you managed yourself with all the information that we've been sharing? Let's hear your thoughts. Let's hear the steps that you have taken. Or if you need help, shout, like we always say, ask those questions, and we'll be happy to answer them here on the show. GCB has some wonderful information for us. If you're looking to pay your educational fees or urgent medical care or pop-up expenses or home makeovers or renovations or even take a vacation or travel, GCB is able to help you with their GCB personal loan. They're asking that we call on 0800 422 422. GCB, your bank for life. Goyle is also promising all of its customers, once you visit any of their stations, you can enjoy up to 2 pesos liter discount on every fuel that you purchase. Goyle, they say good energy, Goyle, Yenara, Yedia. Numbers to call again, 0302-216-541. Pick up that phone, give us a call. If you're driving, by all means, please do not text while you drive, because we want you to arrive alive. But pick up that phone, give us a call. Is your business investor ready? Why did you set up your company? Are you doing things properly? Are you calling meetings? Are you doing the right thing? If somebody came today and wanted to place 1 million cedis in your business, would you be ready? Would you pass that litmus test? Let's hear from you, 0302-216-541. You can also send us your comments on WhatsApp on 055-1111-997. You were making that point while we're waiting for the phone lines to ring. You were making that point earlier on about being investor ready and doing the right things in terms of best practice. Let's continue with that thought, and then I'll ask. There's a question that is really on my mind about data. Yeah. You know, off air we're talking about the fact that when an investor comes to you and asks a question and says, "What is your relationship with your regulator?" For example, they're not only going to be asking about the submission of your finances, for example, to your regulator. They're going to want to know: has there been meetings? Has there been minutes? What are the letters received, for example, from the regulator? There has to be evidence of that process.
Yeah, a well-run company will normally have a file dedicated to the regulator. Copies of payments of maybe license fees, copies of updates on the requirements, reports when they made visits, and so forth. And that by itself. So if I walked into your company and I asked, do you have any correspondence with GRA? Then you go and bring a file. And I'm leafing through and I see that. It tells me, oh, there's something going on. I ask for another, you bring it. That's the kind of, but it's not that we ask, wait, we are going to find it. And that haphazard approach doesn't help at all. Means you don't have that focus. See, we tell people, look, looking for investor funds is not a serious business. You don't take it to chance. You and your team must sit down and make sure you are at it consistently. So you walk into a company and say, okay, do you have any, like we said earlier, do you have any policy on this? Who is the interface with your tax or VAT or what? And you don't have. And each time it's reactive. When they have come and slapped you after a review with penalties and things, then you respond. That is not what they're looking for. See, because like you're saying, all this has a way of affecting the bottom line. I've come across a company that snit penalties over a 4-year period because, and then especially the VAT, they had also VAT. It was a very, very significant figure. Ooh. Oh, yes, because they hadn't bothered to pay and they came calculated, use indexes, rates,
the
penalty rates and things and so on, and they were significant. So now this is a liability. You pass it all to your bottom line. You're not doing much. Before they realized the importance of making these payments, they didn't see the risk until the inspectors came around and did that. You see,
that kind of situation can significantly affect your liquidity, or should I say your trading capital.
Oh, yes. As the GRA, when they started doing their tax audits, I mean, the figures they come out with, some people look at their business and it's sometimes, well, actually, you're looking at some of the COVID figures. The penalty computed is higher than the
value
of the turnover of the previous year. And they don't know how they got it because they just took it for granted. And it is there. This is the law. This is this. You didn't pay at this time. Everything is there, black and white. So the best thing then is to go and negotiate some terms and so on and so forth. But that is when they realize the importance of making sure that these things are, in some jurisdictions, the easiest way to collapse somebody's business is go for him in the regulatory space with taxes and those sort of things. If they violate, there are a whole lot of things you can get them on.
But as a company, is it? We're talking about doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Where do we draw the line? Will there be a margin of error in compliance, or is it possible to achieve 100% compliance?
You see, you said earlier that there's a certain amount of ignorance. And so we ask, I mean, like I'm saying, I'm sitting here, I'm in a space where all you have to do is walk there, tell us which area you're uncertain about, commissioners to do some kind of health check or some other kind of due diligence for you. Then you know, before the regulator comes, then you start to, you don't wait till you are in trouble, you see.
Before you start.
Because the point is, it's not easy now because of the technology to dodge the regulator, because the information comes from different sources. Yeah. And it's easy to track you.
And things are being digitized as well, so obviously it's becoming smaller and smaller.
Oh, yeah.
And less easier to. Okay, I've got Na from Spintex. Good afternoon to you, Na. Always a loyal listener. We should have you on the show sometime, Na. Na says there are currently so many apps that purport to manage your company records, accounts, keep track of different things, analyze data. In this era of paperless record keeping, are phone app records acceptable to investors, or they'd still like printouts of all those records? Okay, this is Na from Spintex. Na wants to know whether digital records are acceptable to investors, or they would require hard copy. And I'm assuming it's things like certificates for investments made, certain sensitive documentation. I mean, if it's just minutes, they can review that. But if it's certain legal documentation, title documentation, they may require to see originals. That's a question that Na is asking.
Yeah, I mean, there are some documents that definitely legal contracts or certain things, they're actually signed and stamped and all that. They are there. But a large percentage of company data is in some digitized form. But then there are hard copies supporting quite a lot of transactions. You might send a soft copy, but you might follow sometimes within. The regulators, for example, nearly always want hard copy evidence. Sometimes when you deliver letters, you even make sure you return with a stamped copy for legal reasons. You don't want to get into trouble with the courts. And when they ask you to come and prove something, you don't have anything tangible to show. So it's a balance.
It is a balance. I've got Harrison on the phone from Dodowa. Good afternoon, Harrison. You're welcome to Masterclass. Talk to us.
Good afternoon. Please, I want to ask this simple question.
Please go ahead,
Okay,
Harrison.
first, when I started my business, I want a DCC, tax clearance certificate. So I went to GRA. And in my first year of operation, when I went there for the tax clearance certificate, they asked me to pay a huge amount, about 3,000. And I told them that tax, normally what I know or what I learned from school, tax is paid after profit. When you declare profit, then you pay tax. My first year of business, I want this, and you asked me to pay almost 3,000. How do I pay? And it has made me, I was unable to pay, and I couldn't get my CPC. Now, as a business owner, what I do is anytime I work, the company deduct 5% of tax from my profit, and it becomes a big challenging for we the startups, because your first year they say pay 3,000. Where am I going to get 3,000 from GRA? And I mean, it's something I don't understand, and I wish your resource person can verify this for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Harrison. Please keep listening. We'll try and answer that question. You heard Harrison.
Yes. I'm not going to hold brief for the tax authorities just like that, but these figures are based on your projected turnover, the kind of business you are doing, and so forth. And usually they will want some kind of deposit. I mean, a sort of prepayment. So you can't just go and ask for a tax clearance certificate or something without making some kind of deposit. So there is that you need to have this understanding that it's always useful to go and make some payment. In fact, a lot of businesses in the past just decided, look, every month let me go and pay the tax people maybe 500 or 200 on account. They never got trouble with the tax authorities because they saw you as a good citizen, always wanting to. So when it's time and they calculate. But you mentioned withholding tax. You see, you need to ensure that you are registered so that those withholding tax, they are actually tax payments for you, you see. So you need to follow up the process so that these become like payments on account for you. So that aspect, because if you keep doing business and the withholding taxes are being taken and you haven't put yourself in the position to have them credited for you on your behalf, you're making a big mistake. It is part of your tax payments. But I think you should realize that the taxman also has a friendly aspect to him. I don't know how you saw it, but just go to another tax person. So this is your challenge. Or if you like, come to us. We will see what the case is and probably find an amicable solution for you. But the point that we must accept is that we need to pay tax for countries to run. And as much as possible, maybe sometimes people use high-handed taxes, but then we just have to accept that some monies must always go to government to help run society.
When you said the taxman has a friendly side to him, it reminded me of a resource person we had here on the show, Mr. Frimpong Corey, and I refer to him as my friendly taxman. I know, sir, at some point in the show, we'll bring him back onto the show. Mr. Corey, if you're listening to us, a very good afternoon to you from Masterclass. And he sort of broke it down for us and helped us to understand that, it's not only take, but there are reliefs also, which people don't know. And I suppose that when we're talking about best practice, a good business is one that also knows about the tax reliefs and takes advantage of it. Some of the wealthiest people in the world are people who have paid attention to their taxes. It's not necessarily, just one way, Next week, we're sort of going to be continuing with the same conversation again. But let's sort of round up. If we remember nothing from our conversation today as businesses, as business owners, we've talked about recruitment, we've talked about best practice, we've talked about relationship with regulators, we've talked about making sure that simple things like keeping minutes in your board meetings, your financials, don't play with your financials because the data does not lie. There's something about data. It tells the story as it is. So if you say, for example, you've done X volume of business, it should go with the X volume of output. But it should also go with the X volume of process. And sometimes we go straight to the output and we forget the process. Then when they're asking questions about the process, we are found wanting. What's our takeout from today's conversation?
Yes, I think businesses must recognize that the investor is going to look at your track record, your historical growth patterns. Then he's going to look at your futuristic prospects. But your futuristic prospects are going to depend on some assumptions. And if the assumptions are not realistic, he's going to reject it because he's going to look at industry, your strategies around market share, whether it's an evolving business, are you going to another type of business? If he's going to give you funding, what kind of new business are you going to generate? X issues coming. And if you lied in your past, you can't say you are making a return of 5% for the last 5 years and suddenly tell him you are going to make a 60% return this year just because of X, Y. It doesn't make sense. And that is what we are in, that if you want to look out for an investor, have somebody look at your figures, historical trend, give you, there are a whole lot of ratio analysis and things. Let them give you an idea of your present status. And then suggest ways and means of strengthening areas and so on. Come up with some kind of plan. You can call it business plan, you can call it project, whatever name you want to. But something that actually incorporates your management team into deliverables that can move the company forward and give some kind of confidence to an outside party that, yes, these returns you are projecting it's doable.
They are realistic.
Yes.
Next week, what should we look forward to in the same conversation?
This time we were looking at the background to some of these things. I'm hoping that next week we can probably look at a few specific examples in terms of numbers, what kind of numbers some people looked at and what they projected that didn't make sense, and an investor walked away. See, there's a funny thought that keeps coming in every once in a while, that some people think that you only just present anything and then the investor will just come and put money down.
It doesn't work that way.
The investor has a team who will look through things very well and ask you. Sometimes, in fact, there's one particular case there, everything looked good except that the owner didn't have a hands-on knowledge of his own business.
Hold that thought for me. When we come back next week, we're by all means going to go into that, and we'll put out the number for First Code Management Service as well. They're also a consultancy that provides support in all of these things that we're talking about. This has been Masterclass here on the Superstation. It's been an exciting conversation with Mr. DeGraff Johnson. We're glad we're going to have him back again here next week on the show, God willing. Thank you so much for listening and watching us. We'll see you same time next week.